So good evening, everybody. It's great to see so many people manage to fight their way through Eventbrite and manage to get in. We've got three wonderful poets tonight. Our main man, of course, is Richard Carpenter, who's going to launch his collection, My Birder. It's actually on sale now. Richard has got copies. We've got some as well on our website, but please go to Richard first, make your inquiries. So Richard Carpenter has been writing poems since shortly after retiring as a GP. And he's published two earlier books of poetry through a local company near his home in Yorkshire. It's called Quacks. His third collection, My Birder, was written sadly after Nicholas, one of his twin sons, was killed in a tragic accident. Nicholas died instantly when struck by a car travelling along the road into York, about half a mile from their home. Nicholas was a keen birder and did several breeding bird surveys in the spring and early summer. This time, he'd been asked to start a willow-tit survey in a quadrant north of their home. One side of this quadrant was the main road. It was natural for Richard to write about this devastating loss, and some of the poems address the event directly, while others celebrate the natural landscape and the world of birds and animals that Nicholas loved. When Richard sent us his book, we recognized both the quality of the poetic imagination and language of Richard's writing, and the extraordinary passion with which these poems address the themes of love and grief. We were in no doubt that this collection must be published without delay. So, tonight, we welcome Richard and his two guest poets, Carole Bromley and Janet Dean, to celebrate the launch of My Birder in memory of Nicholas Carpenter. So, a couple of extra people have just joined. I'm reminding everybody, please mute while anybody else is reading. And we're going to start with a set of the poems from the book by Richard. Richard, would you like to unmute and read for us?
Thank you very much indeed, Janice, for that introduction, and Donald. And I'd like to take the opportunity to thank a very wide range of colleagues, friends, people I've met, people who've taught me, particularly over the last few years. Water shortage. If the water board could capture all my tears that flow with the dawn, wring out the sodden tissues, and so refill the reservoirs with too overflowing. If they could follow behind me, perhaps with a bib contraption invented by Heath Robinson, as I listened to the morning chorus. If they could harvest all this water, it would solve so many problems, since I am not able to stop crying. Now I have to find the right page. This is a poem I wrote actually very recently, although you might say it refers to the early days, called Write Raw. I know my writing must be raw when I listen to a poem of grief recited with unfettered vigor. I hear the same poem of grief read with a steady voice, a paean to a loved one, which must be raw. I try a steady voice, choose a paean whose words are smooth, not raw, to soar into my well-hidden grief. I rant, I rave, my voice ripped raw when I shout with unfettered vigor, then tuck my grief into a drawer. Now, there is a advice that people are given sorry, I'm on a wrong track here there. This is about comfort food. If people are going through a period of extreme tension, trauma, it's a regular habit in certain ways, and it's happened to me. People will bring you your food, comfort food, and certain food is preferred as comfort food. If you weep into your risotto, there is no joy in the sofrito as the garlic melts into the butter. No pleasure with the tostatura when you carefully warm each pure white pearl. You miss the pungent smell of the sliced porcini before the first ladleful of stock. The constant stirring brings no ease, now the grains soften off the spoon. You don't share the stillness as the pan rests by the stove. There is no release with the manticatura when this spoon folds and folds to bring lightness to your supper. You have to stay your hand with the grana, since the pecorino stagionato you have chosen is too salty, and your dish is already seasoned. The title poem, My Birder. My birder. This time I saw him at my shoulder, bent part forward, intent on what he saw. His face was framed by his usual mane, his shaggy beard, intent on what he saw. The eyes were clear, no worry lines betrayed his face, just intent on what he saw. Was he intent on what I was writing before commenting on what he saw? Was he interested in the poem I was penning in my half-sleep, a usual remedy for insomnia near the dawn? Or did I see him just intent on what he saw? He may have expressed a passing interest, picked out a word to check its derivation, or how it was an answer to his clue, the final one, 10 across, in the press. More likely he'd spied the tree creeper as it skips round the trunk of the apple at the bottom of our garden, a young one with a downy breast, the small sharp beak, and the mannerisms of its parent higher up on a nearby sycamore. Likely that he already knew where they rested, could show me where their nest is. As Janice said, Nicholas was surveying an area where there might be willow-tits. So this poem is searching for a willow-tit. Take a walk along this old canal, this towpath where narrow boats traded, full of coal. This path where dank scrub now catches at the edges. This scrub that was raided for fuel to heat the billy. This billy goat that may be browsing on succulent twigs among the brambles. Scramble up this path to the embankment, which supported one end of a bridge, where you may walk on railway cinders. This was all my world until you came to tidy up the edges, clear a mile or two for houses. So young damp undergrowth became mature isolated islands, where there was no rotting deadwood to chisel our nest for babies. Take this walk and you may see a few of us in our sooty black beanies stretched down our necks to cover our backs. This scraggy bib and buff-coloured belly, not to be mistaken for a marsh tit. In this post-industrial scrub, you may find us hard to spot, so some of you play a trick with a handheld recorder playing our tune till we sing back, till we find an untidy group of volunteers who have no care but nature who have lobbied neighbours to allow this patch and that to rewild so a network of our green pathways is reinstated on your map. And before I ask my friends to read their poems, just one final one, which is titled with a bit of advice for people who are grieving, which I consider to be false. It'll pass. The leaden feeling in your limbs, the knotted ropes around your shoulders, the sea fret in your brain, these will ease with time and practice. But what comes in their place? A vacant spot where you should be doing the tapping on your shoulder to perform your duty, a house to clear, a life to put to bed, the fates to berate, the arguments over memories and mementos, even cash. All these will pass and perhaps not leave a stain. They will return when your guard is down and there's no sea fret to protect your brain, no knotted arms around your shoulder, no leaden limbs to stop you running when something small reminds you of your loved one. Carole's going to read some poems, and then Janet. Carole started me writing poems 13 years ago, and has continued to say, write, read, write, read, write, read, all the time. No, she has been a great friend and mentor over those years. Janet has been a friend, and I say that with a capital F, over several years, and organizes very helpful writing groups on the net, which have been very helpful over the last few years. So Carole's turn first, I think.
Okay, thank you very much, Richard. Can we just give Richard a round of applause, please? That was a wonderful set, and the book is amazing. It's an amazing achievement, and I don't know how you managed to read the poems, but you read them with such aplomb and dignity, so well done. Beautiful. As Nicholas was a birder, and the only time I ever met him, he was going birding with his dad at the Arboretum, I thought I would read 4 poems about birds in one way or another. And the first one is the title poem of my most recent collection, The Peregrine Falcons of York Minster. There is indeed a nest at the top of York Minster, which I believe has a webcam on running all the time, and you can watch them. You can watch the chicks being fed by their parents at the moment. So I went along rather over-optimistically, thinking I'd be able to see them, and I think what I actually saw were pigeons, but I did try with my binoculars. And a lot of other people had their binoculars trained on the top of York Minster. So the Peregrine Falcons of York Minster. Best observed from Dean's Park. Bring binoculars and stand well back so you don't get a crick in your neck. Mr. and Mrs. Minster are high up on the northwest tower, on the balcony, or on a grotesque. The falcon prefers the thoughtful man, who for centuries has stroked his chin and ignored the crowds below. The tiercel sits on the eroded carving the other side of the belfry, the smaller of the two, less powerful, more easygoing, with a neater and cleaner look, even when fluffed up and relaxing. It's the female who hunts the pigeons, which nest on that ledge in Stonegate, just behind the stone cat above J.W. Knowles, stained glass, leaded lights, decorations. Look out, the chicks will be snatched and whisked to a nest where the fledglings will soon take their first scary flight from the house of God. I was a teacher. I was delighted to help Richard discover that he could write poetry, and he was a joy to teach. And thank you very much. There are a number of other ex-students who are here tonight. Thank you very much for coming to support Richard. I was a teacher, and when I first went back into teaching after bringing up my 4 children, well, sort of bringing them up, I took a full-time job at Joseph Rowntree School, which is not a million miles away from Richard's home, and I found it quite demanding, having 4 small children myself and teaching. So I decided that desperation measures were needed, and so I set some of my classes talks because I thought they could do the work, and I stressed that visual aids were really important. So to bring in a visual aid, and the following morning, there was a queue of people outside my door. And one of them had a mountain bike that I had to look after for the day. And one of them had a fishing rod. And this little boy, Stephen, had a pigeon, a racing pigeon in a box, which I had to look after, and it scratted underneath my desk all day. And it was delightful. He was quite a shy boy, and he gave the most wonderful talk about this pigeon, and then he led us all outside and let the pigeon go, and it was a wonderful moment. So it's called homing. All that morning it scratted and crooned in its cage under my desk, brought in as a visual aid for Stephen's hobbies talk. At break I locked it in with Danny's fishing flies and Tom's mountain bike. At lunchtime Stephen came with grain and water and a soothing hand. Last period, he stood at the front, his voice steady, no trace of the stammer, and explained about the ring and the loft, how sometimes they get blown off course, and all the time his hand, with its bitten nails, stroked the bird firmly. At the end, he led them out, a small, skinny Pied Piper, and released it. 35 upturned faces watched till it disappeared somewhere over New Year's Wick. The third poem is about red kites at Harewood. Red kites used to be quite rare in North Yorkshire, but they've recently been reintroduced and they're doing rather well. In fact, in Harrogate, I believe you have to be very careful about letting your guinea pigs out because they're circling above the gardens all the time. I don't know what they're hoping to find, but my daughter lives in Harrogate and I watch them. But they're really rather magnificent. I do think they're wonderful. So this was about a Boxing Day walk at Harewood. Red kites at Harewood. They own the Yorkshire air, riding its currents, shrugging off cold winds that bring leaves rattling and children pedalling on Boxing Day bikes, and couples hiking hand in gloved hand, not looking up at where they tremble on taut string, then stoop to snatch at carrion or worms, or sometimes a skittering vole or a hedge sparrow foraging. And now the low sun is dipping behind the hill, trees are shivering, birch and beech, storm connors coming, and in their tops, red kites are roosting. And I seem to remember that poem went through the stanza group that I facilitate in York, and lots of stanza members here tonight. And thank you very much for coming, all of you. And my final poem is about a rather different subject. Richard and I both were former patients at the neurosurgery ward in Hull Royal Infirmary. And so I think it's particularly remarkable that Richard has not only surfaced from that rather nightmare experience, but has actually produced a book of poems about his son. I think I take my hat off to him. So this is about me watching the pigeons. Hull Royal Infirmary, when my daughter saw it, she said, "That's not a hospital, it's a tower block." And it does just look like a tower block. It's a very tall building. And on the very top, pigeons would arrive. So I was sort of, I don't know, 4th floor or something, and all I could see from my window was a blank wall and the top of the roof where a guy was trying very hard to keep the pigeons out of the central heating. I gather that's because they can spread disease through the air conditioning if you let them in. So his job was obviously to try and get rid of them. But every morning I looked forward to these pigeons returning because they were the only natural thing that I saw, you know, in the month that I was in there. So I don't know whether Richard ended up watching the pigeons as well, but I was transfixed. So it's called Neurosurgery, Ward 4, Bed 8. Which is what they used to ask me every morning. Do you know where you are? And I'd say, I chant it to them. And then sometimes they'd say, do you know what day it is? And so I would check before they came round on my phone. I think, God, I don't know what date, you know, probably going to lock me up if I get it wrong. And then one day I practiced, you know, what date it was. And she said, who is the Prime Minister? It almost threw me, but I said, unless we've had a stroke of luck while I'm in here, it's probably still Theresa May, who it was at the time. Anyway, neurosurgery, Ward 4, Bed 8. The drain in my spine is emptied, 10 mLs of brain fluid per hour. The nurse appears to turn the tap. If I sit up, the headache worsens, so I lie flat under my regulation cotton blanket and for hours watch the pigeons dance on the rooftop, where sometimes a man appears to tie down the net. The nurses tell me it's windy, but nothing moves. There are no trees or reeds to whisper in the wind. How determined they are, my pigeons, to make their nest in this inhospitable place. It must be warm on top of the air conditioners, and behind, if the man would only let them, they could bring twigs and mate and lay warm eggs and preen themselves in privacy and warmth. How I would like to preen myself. In 3 more days, I can shower and wash my hair. I can cut my nails. How determined they are, my beautiful pigeons. If only the man in grey would leave them alone. I want to fling open the window and let in the air and call out to them. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, beautiful birds.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Carole. That was lovely. I remember the short collection that you wrote after your hospital stay. It's very moving.
Mm.
Thank you very much. And the other bird poems were beautiful too. So now we're going to come to Janet Dean. I think perhaps Richard will want to say something about his friendship with her, but I've got this to say. Janet is from Barnsley and lives in York. Her poems appear in a range of anthologies and magazines, and they've been placed in the Yeovil Prize, the Brian Dempsey Memorial, that was our prize, and Freedom from Torture competitions. And she's been highly commended in the Bridport Prize in 2022. Writing as Janet Dean Knight, her novel, The Peacemaker, was published in 2019, but I think we're going to hear poems tonight. Richard, do you want to add anything?
I hoped that you would remember to mention Peacemaker. I had forgotten. It's a very, very good read indeed. I thoroughly recommend it. And I think Janet has 2 books that might follow. So far, we're waiting for them. I was on Ward 4 as well as Carole, but I was very lucky in that my bed looked out down the estuary, the Humber estuary, and the weather was very good, as it has been the last week. And so I had the most glorious sunsets and sunrises down the estuary. That is referred to in one of the poems in my collection, but not one which is a rather complicated poem, so I haven't read it, put it down to read tonight. As I tried to say in my introduction, Janet has been a very good friend to me over the last few years and has supported me on a number of occasions in her inimitable way, and for which I am very grateful. And so we have some nice poems from.
Thank you, Richard. It was worth coming just to be referred to as inimitable. I won't forget that. Thank you. I'm going to read 4 poems, and they are connected by references to nature, but they're all quite different. I hope you'll enjoy them. Janice mentioned that I come from Barnsley. I was born and brought up in Grimethorpe, and the first poem I'm going to read is about an experience when I was about 8, and we moved from a prefab to a proper house in another part of the village. And this is about my mother clearing out the house and finding that my brother had been breeding mice in the shed. It's called Blind Mice. I was born on the milefield, the wind thumping the windows, Mam in the bedroom, Florrie Clawton for a midwife, Dad alone with his whiskey waiting to wet my head. We roamed the Ginnel between Davis's and Parker's into Thompson's Field with our potted meat sandwiches, picking china fragments from the cinder path, snagged our knickers sliding down the slag, blew off dandelion clocks and split the daisies, our roasted shoulders soothed on cushioned clover. Before we moved to White City, opposite Lady Wood, where our mam had the wood grain kitchen door replaced with a frosted glass slider, before my walk home from school was up the valley, she set to clearing. Let us keep a box each of the treasure we had under our beds, though she confiscated Brian's blown birds' eggs and his tin of rusted keys. Dad said to leave all that shite in the shed, as if he knew she'd already drowned the mice. And this next poem is, it's one that's about my teenage years. It's written in the form of a letter to Charlotte Bronte, and I feel I ought to apologise to English teachers present, like Carole and probably others of you, because it's really inspired by my intense dislike of Jane Eyre when I was a teenager. It's the one, I think, that's in the What the Moon Was Told anthology published by Janice and Donal. It's called However Feminist. Charlotte, I smell the smoke in your hearth, the warmth in the corner of a cold room. Your shawl affords a wrap of comfort. Lace gloves prevent your fingers turning blue. Your breathing, not as heavily as Anne, whistling through your concentration, squeezing your pen, pulling it over cheap paper. How the moor fills your mind with downtrodden girls lifted by the passion of men, delivered into their care. I didn't want to listen to this version of women's lives. However feminist I see it now, it wasn't then. It wasn't bold, it wasn't wild. You implied corsetry and layers of petticoat. I hoped to leave off my bra if the weather was warm enough to keep my nipples soft. I hoped to stride out onto the moor in walking boots, leaving a trail of beardless boys behind me. And the third poem I'm going to read, a bit of a change of mood. This is a lockdown poem written right at the beginning of the first lockdown when we had that beautiful weather, a bit like we've been having recently. It was really about rediscovering nature through being in the garden all the time. It's called On Sunday It Might Rain. I feel I know the grass now, though it's taken years. I've emerged from a dream of not knowing where I was, coming and going, buying tickets, making plans, but not really knowing. I come and go over the grass, driving a fine spray with a flexible head like a blind antenna, back and forth across the lawn. Here, little ferns spread like fresh green doilies, periwinkles shiver, daisies sprout. The mossy underfelt puts spring in me. I bounce on old Ugg boots, the best I can do in the absence of wellies. I've got new secateurs and onion plants and recycled plastic milk bottle bottoms and toilet roll innards. As I spray under the beach in the woodland chaos, cross the lawn to catch the overrun of spurge, I realise there's more to know with less about, and catch sight of things that grow from dormant memory. The luscious heads of peony will overflow, bleed on the lawn like spilt wine. I'm waiting for Lady's Mantle, for her capes to rise and hold the raindrops. And this last poem was written at the Moors Centre up at Danby in North York Moors, where I sometimes run writing courses with Clara Challoner Walker. And I'm hoping one day, hopefully maybe this summer, Richard might be able to get up and come and write with us there, because I know he would like to do that. I chose this poem again because it's about the natural world, but I hope the end of it resonates a little bit for him. It's inspired by an exhibition in the gallery there, which was of natural subjects. There were some paintings and sculpture all about the natural world. And then I walked out of that exhibition into the gallery of the natural world itself, and that's what this poem is trying to reflect. It's called Nature Gallery. Foxglove lamps advance in the dark, lime leaves footlight a long catwalk. Unbroken trees writhe, humans at their feet. Undergrowth squirms, hares and lizards, hinds and sticklebacks, an eco-skeleton of stag in twisted copper mesh, a fox in silhouette. Unnamed man shrugs a pullover carapace. Twisted parsnip roots drip from his torso. A woman made of trees meets solitary birds, swayed top hill, filament of cows, sheep in bales. Nature ordered, rearranged. The reality of decay. A single shower shaken from the trees. Softness in the breeze taunts my cheek. Captures depth of shade in Copper Beach. Carved yellow fish swim in wild air. Wind orchestrates branches. Rope swing creaks. Squeak of rubber seat. Voices of children and birds are hard to tell apart. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet.
Thank you, Janet.
Oh, I've got an echo. No, it's all right, it's gone.
No,
Thank you
it's
very much. Thank you very much. That was beautiful. I remember that poem that we published in the What the Moon Said, I think it was called. Particularly, I love the combination of an artificial exhibition and nature's exhibition. That was lovely. Thank you. So back to Richard, and Richard is going to read a slightly longer set, I think, which we're looking forward to. So I think you are unmuted, aren't you?
I am, yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much. A practical point while I remember, I tried to create a website for myself, Computer One, Richard Nil. Computers see me coming and they usually win. So email and I will respond. Now, in my hand, I have what is called a comfort cross or a hand cross. Now, I was given this when at Nicholas's memorial, this particular one, but the poem is actually about a friend's comfort cross, which is rather different to this. It was much smoother, it was much rounder. And I actually sat with her on her final afternoon and I held her comfort cross. Now, I am not a theist. So you would say, why do I write a poem about this? I don't have the answer. Comfort cross. Two branches pruned too open, the center of an ancient olive tree, and so allow clear air, free rein, now spliced to form a hand cross, with a join so tight you only see when you concentrate on grain, as it wraps around the upright in widespread lines to bind a piece in place where thumb and finger rest across. in comfort. 4 points are rounded, smoothed by a constant usage, to fit snug into the palm, caressed as fingers trace the shape. A man with 2 arms held off centre, upright ahead, at a quizzing angle, inviting rest. Now, obviously, domestic life has to continue, whatever else is happening. Your house needs attention. Waiting for the oil man. I switch off my rising sun alarm, pull my breeks and jumper on to stumble down the stairs and illuminate the yard. 2 at the front door, 1 at the back, and 1 at each end of the byre. He won't go wrong, since both front and back face north. Now to free the oil room door, 1 padlock, 2 strong bolts, and I'm ready. Should I mash some tea? There's a real nip in the air. It's only 7, give him 30 minutes. I was among the first for the autumn drop, around 7:30. The tea turns jet black and smells of tar. I've scrubbed the kitchen floor, cleaned the grouting with a thin, stiff brush, where a filthy tide mark builds up through the year, and shed tears. My son helped my knees and back by doing this last Christmas. He's not here now, and never will be. So I will have to put up with my body screaming. Lunch before my wife goes out shopping. There's a fight with the form I want to write for a poem. 3 wood stoves burning, and it's cozy. A cup of tea for me, turn the yard lights on again, and I've grown impatient. Perhaps I've the wrong day in my diary. Ring, 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 ring. There's no answer. Another diary check. Okay, a second ring. Ring, ring. A soothing answer from headquarters. Yes, he's on his way. At this time of year, it's a 12-hour day. I leave the lights on, the curtains back, so I won't miss him, and set to cook a leek and parsnip pie for supper. I don't miss him. The house fills up and settles down to eat the pie, the roasts, the sprouts, and still I miss him. We put the house to bed, reset my alarm so I light the yard again in the morning. But when I call headquarters as they open, yesterday he phoned in sick. You're in the book for later in the week. We live very near a common, Strensel Common. I love going walking there. Nicholas loved going walking there. James loves walking there. We all do. Sunrise on Strensel Common. The frosted rough wood fencing round the range is left finger smooth by a moonlit night, the heather blanketed by silvered silk. The mist lifts slowly with a rising sun to reveal the ling in palest purple. A yaffle wakes with a short, sharp cackle, the answers muffled by some distance and the baffle of birch and oak. Muntjac break their cover. I too am feral, so run in dusky sunrise or bright light, freed from duty to match my diary with another. Sick fate dictates this ease, to gazelle a path in silent flight. Now I'm left alone by a careless slight. A guzzle, a gazelle, a guzzle. You might puzzle and wish to see this in print so that you can work out who the lover is and etc. My harsh, cold lover. She returns with the hoarfrost to turn old age to passion, walk out with me and burn my hand with passion. I was lulled by the sunshine through the falling leaves, the rustling of their red and brown, the sound of passion. The year falls back to youth with the memory of runs, smell of coal in the still, cool air around my passion. There, she beckons me with her finger, wraps her arms around my soul to hibernate under bands of passion. I see her colour as the splintered ice cuts into my feet, yellow aconites in her hair, which abound with passion. Her snowdrop skin, her lips of early purple crocus, which open to an orange throat, are grounds for passion. She melts away in my embrace. Next year, Richard waits, ready to repel her, not ready to be found by her final passion. Six months on, I find simple jobs for distraction to avoid thinking of that moment. The wood stoves need relaying and a match to light the paper, a return when the first one's sluggish. There's a need to meditate because the scar keeps itching and there's no gain from red raw bleeding. Perhaps just think about the weather, different from this fag end of an autumn. A warm, clear, late March day with birds singing like the one before and ever after. Can I think about the traffic? It's a busy country road, sometimes with boy racers. I hear them every day. The ones before and ever after. One of the things that happened with COVID, of course, is that we all felt cut off from our usual world, the world which gives us comfort. Visitor, January 2021. The lockdown starts at the build-up to the anniversary. He would wish on no one. So the salve of walking to his familiar shops, taking time to yatter, ambling side streets with cats climbing balconies, is barred to him, and his misery is allowed to fester. 1 year on, he allows himself to ruminate about a garden now rewilding, the flood of words at high tide, unsought leisure when it's low. It's been his home for 30 years, and now he feels a visitor in his city. When the year is new and flowers in its proper order, he'll pretend he's a brothel up north on holiday and walk his city streets anew, chatter to the locals, explore the narrow ginnels, find the little wren in Zooch Chapel. Tipping point. I step into my garden and listen to the geese, who settle on a nearby water meadow, a patch where they intend to build a bund to hold back water when a flood threatens. And a flood does threaten. Our land is low, fields flat, my garden's soaking as a sponge cruising round my bath suds as I soak. The neighbours' kind create a baseline to the chorus. Perhaps they've had enough and wish a warm, dry shed strewn with straw as bedding in abundance to dry their hooves. It's not the sodden turf that holds my attention. It's the soft, sweet smell of the old year turning, a New Year's sigh, fresh thoughts, and yearning. "5 weeks before the winter equinox. The grass is dank, the sky is dreek, the mood is low, I'm loath to speak. This birch wears gold, the sky light grey, the cherry bears a sparse white spray. A skein of geese, sharp call to suit, I fill my trug with windfall fruit. Bromley's blushed a shepherd's warning, sky stays grey, no coloured awning. Yaffle pulls across my eyeline, beaked head clear against the skyline. Now Nicholas was a cat lover, and he would get up early to do his breeding bird surveys. Birds get up early, of course. And it was not unusual to find him having a kip in the middle of the day on the sofa, laid out, snoring away merrily, with our ginger cat curled up beside him. This one was called Ember. Ember's Welsh throat. Long, orange, brown wool tassels hang and twist to tease the moth that takes them for a spider to be chased across the floor. Many ginger cats have played this game in my mother's house. So when the outside feral puss becomes inside, turning the throw inside outside, a soft laugh from the past is no help with a name. She used them up, except the dying of the light. Our present cat is called Prydwen. Prydwen is Welsh for fair face. It is also Welsh for Arthur's ship. It's also Welsh for Arthur's shield. Probably a few other things along the line. At any rate, mindfulness. Prydwen answers to my keening and comes to claim my lap. She knows to leave me weeping as she prowls the breakfast table and knows my arms will lift her and place her plump black body on my lap. She knows to nudge my hand resting by her head, so I caress beneath her chin and feel my shoulders settle at her insistent back throat rumble. She knows how long she wants my hand to stroke her back and pick out the flecks of white that cause her coat to shimmer. She knows when I am ready, so she can stretch her paws to regain the table. Knows I will reach out and lift her, lower her gently to the floor. Now, I'm going to read a poem that you might have heard from Janice and Donald's website, because it's on a recording. This one is about a wildlife reserve, which is immediately west from Revo Abbey, and people who know the moors in that area know that the moors fold and fold and fold. So this is the next valley along. Ashbury. She's fresh, sorry, I'll start again. Ashbury. She's fresh lichen on the weathered gate, the gentle slope, the clart that has me slip into her limestone grassland. The constant murmur of this crystal stream that scatters sunlight and plays these pastures. She's a fold in the moors left to her own devices, a wet field of orchid laced with ragged robin. The bent grasses of a narrow path traced to show me where to find the birdfoot primrose. She's this flower, a black-eyed primrose rimmed by ochre, 5 pale purple petals inches from the earth. The streamside path leading to a footbridge, which points me to where marsh orchids vary. Here the opera luca, there the pink with dark veining, waiting for an anorak to name them. She's a soft scent from the helleborine when the nostrils barely touch. The fingertips that search the sweet spot of the tway blade, 2 matching leaves laid flat near the grass. The walk through the woods where ash lies by the wayside in its ivory bed of wood anemone. She's this hollow of unbent grass where I drink green leaf tea and hear her murmur, "Close your eye so you may see." And finally, we were on holiday in Suffolk, and traveling north, we needed a pit stop. And we could stop at Wycombe Fen, north of Cambridge, on our way. Wycombe Fen hobbies. These scimitars skim the mere to catch their insect snacks in a claw. Then flick the feast from fist to beak. Don't blink, you'll miss the dip in flight, as a hawker makes a meal. Hobbies skip the kitchen blades as swifts flash from every angle into view. Today they don't dive to clutch a fluttering swift, tear flesh with beak and talon to feed their young. This day is thick with insects. I count 5, 6 hobbies in the swarm of swifts. It's just one pair, my birder says, that confuse with acrobatics, then return another way. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Richard. That was a beautiful set. Where did you take this photograph that we did the cover from? Oh, you're muted. You're muted. Unmute.
Now, in the collection, there is a flat-stalked spindle, and so there's a poem about that.
Yes.
It's in my garden. And it's actually I have a very big garden. At the moment, it would be underneath a climbing rose, which is on top of a very large, mature cherry tree. It's really climbed right to the top. But that is usually, it's a spindle tree, and they're usually very brightly colored in the autumn time. I noticed in the autumn that its leaf was white. I took it as white. Now it's in the shade, it's in deep shade where it is. And when I actually went up to look more closely, I realized that it wasn't entirely white. It had a beautiful light pink, very light pink shading
See the pink just on the edge.
In the throat of the leaf.
Yes.
And I have since checked with someone who runs Bluebell Nursery in Arboretum near Ashby de la Zouche, which is a fabulous place to go to, why I might have had a white-leafed spindle rather than a burgundy-leafed spindle or some similar color. And he agreed with me that it was because it was in such deep shade. It's a ghost. I saw it as a ghost.
It's a lovely soft picture. It just seems to me perfect for the subject of your book.
Thank you very much.